Alright, y'all, it's January the 4th, 2018, and we have already established that there's a typical type of character. That's not to say all, but as a general rule, there's a typical type of man walking around Silicon Valley, getting laid all over the place, God bless him, walking around Silicon Valley, and just being very unmasculine, not having the qualities that is traditionally taken to woo ladies and get them to get naked with you. All right, there are nerds out there like that in Silicon Valley. It's actually a lot more significant and worse than you would just think off the top of your head. That is a bad situation, real bad. But we're gonna discuss that. There is a man, and like I said, typically speaking, very feminist, very like outwardly feminine. All right. Talking about glass ceilings, talking about this and that, talking about women's oppression, talking about feminism, this, that, and the other. And then we're noticing that names keep popping up of all these guys who kind of like that, very effeminate things of this nature, and it turns out they're actually sexual abusers. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and continue to read this article by Miss Emily Chang from off of Vanity Fair. I think she did a superb job. And we're going to continue to read because there's a lot more to read. All right. So this is Emily Chang. She says, I believe there is a critical story to tell about how the women who participate in these events are often marginalized. Really. All right. Even if they attend of their own volition, which is the case. I mean, if it wasn't of their own volition, these sex orgies would be rape parties. So obviously it's of their own volition, these ladies. Okay. So Emily Chang says this: one female investor who had heard of these parties before I approached her told me women are participating in this culture to improve their lives. I want to dwell upon that sentence real quick. She's talking about just investors, people in the business of tech. She said this: women are participating in this culture to improve their lives. And we're going to analyze whether or not this is actually the case. All right. They are an underclass in Silicon Valley. She says this of ladies. All right. A male investor who works for one of the most powerful men in tech put it this way. He said, I see a lot of men leading people on, sleeping with a dozen women at the same time. Maybe not at the same time, maybe at the same time, but probably separately, but, consecutively, basically. But if each of the dozen women doesn't care, and this is the male tech investor, he says, if each of the dozen women doesn't care, is there a crime being committed? And my answer to you right now, as far as I know in the legal system, no, there's not a crime being committed. Right? So you could say it's disgusting, but not illegal. It just perpetuates a culture that keeps women down. All right. So people are kind of in agreement. This male investor, that female investor, they both already kind of are starting to understand something that's not widely discussed here. Or, I mean, not widely discussed on your television and whatnot, your MSNBCs. They're not talking about how, man, this is rampant, right? And this is a particular and specific industry in which you can name names at which women are being held down. And they are being held down, for real. All right, it's very obvious, it's very apparent. All right, so let's continue. To be clear, there is a wide range of parties for experimental sexual behavior. And I know a lot of us might not be aware of these sexual parties. There's a lot of different specific ones, specifically for different sexual deviations, right? So some are devoted entirely to sex, may be drug and alcohol free, all right, to encourage safety and performance, whatever that means, and demand a balanced gender ratio. So some might have no drugs, no alcohol, and it's specifically one boy for every one girl. Now, I just thinking about the social climate, it's kind of amazing that they're even allowed to limit how many boys and girls there are, because they're being very gender intolerant by making sure there's the same number of boys and girls. But sometimes in certain parties there are the same number of boys and girls. A lot of the times it's not the case. it's never more boys than girls, all right? It's always way more ladies than these dudes, or it might be 1-to-1 ratio, all right? So this kind of stuff does happen. There's various different kind of, and it's important to note that there are different kinds of parties. You only get invited to the ones in which you fit into their circle, all right? So just to continue, it says there's a whole wide range of these parties. Some are devoted to sex and it's drug and alcohol free, and they demand gender ratio. Others are very heavy on drugs and women, and usually and in group. This is quote cuddle puddles. That's terminology that's going to be trending pretty soon. A gateway to ever so slightly more discreet sexual encounters. If you don't understand, I know you've probably seen it on movies. I've seen it as well, where people are all naked, all together, just lying together, all sort of boys and girls and things, and then what they call is cuddle puddle. And when you're involved in the cuddle puddle, you might do some sexual things that these people don't even know about, even though they're directly connected to you physically, because they're so gone out of their brains on drugs. This is what's happening, all right? And a lot of y'all might already understand that's what's happening. We have seen it in movies. They're called cuddle puddles, all right? And I know it sounds silly. It almost reminds you of puppies, but it's not that. It's actually very disgusting. Men show up only if directly invited by the host, right, to these parties, obviously, right? Men only show up if directly invited by the host, and they can often bring as many women as they want to these parties. You understand the rules? All right, this might sound very stereotypically 80s jock in the movies to y'all, but no. In these parties, certainly, you can invite as many women as you want, but guys, well, they can't come along as plus ones. Remember when we were talking about all this progressiveness and breaking tradition and not trying to be open-minded and break through the horizons of things? You would figure in these cases that, we're trying to break tradition. Maybe get homo together. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't y'all get homo together? You're trying to break tradition. You're trying to break the paradigms. But you're going to notice that that's not exactly what takes place, right? All right, so let's continue. Men show up, like I said, directly invited by the host. And they can often bring as many women as they want, but guys can't come along as plus ones. No, sorry, Bob. No, that would upset the preferred gender ratio. All right? Invitations are shared via word of mouth, Facebook, Snapchat. Perfect, because messages soon disappear. It's very secretive, remember? All right? It's very secretive. These things that people are so proud about are even basic paperless post. Nothing in the wording screams sex party. Obviously, they're being very discreet about it. Or cuddle puddle. They don't mention cuddle puddles in the flyers, basically. In case the invitation gets forwarded to, or someone takes a screenshot, they don't want evidence. They don't want people talking about their sex orgies. But they're very proud of them. But they're very secretive about it. All right. Besides, there's no need to spell things out. All right. The guests on the list understand just what kind of party this is. I mean, what the lady's saying is, when you get invited to one of these parties, you're not ignorant to what happens at these parties. You're just not. Period. Is what this lady is saying. All right. So the guests on the list understand just what kind of party it is. Women too will spread the word, obviously. Of course they will. Among their female friends, and the expectations are heartily hidden. They might say, do you want to come to this really exclusive party? The theme is bondage. You want to come? All right. One female entrepreneur told me, she said, it's at this VC or founder's house, and he asked me to invite you. And you're going to notice that that's a common title, I guess. Some of these big shots with all this money in the Silicon Valley and the tech world, they're called VCs or founders because they founded certain things. They founded the Twitters and the hashtags and this and that. Or they're called VCs, and I don't know what that stands for, nor do I care. But that's what's, these are the people enacting all of the sexual orgies, are these VCs and the founders, because they have all the money to do it. So perhaps this culture, just to read on, is just one of the many offshoots of the sexually progressive Bay Area. We're talking about San Francisco, obviously. Yeah, people are aware of what's called progressive, mind you, of the sexually progressive Bay Area. And mind you, naturally this would include homosexuality and whatever. It just means it's just sexually fluid. All right, that is what being progressive is. It's trying to break barriers. It's saying, oh, all you traditional people, all y'all Christians, just doing what y'all do, that's stupid and that's silly and y'all shouldn't do it because it's unsuccessful. I'm going to go over here and be sexually open and minded. Right? Some people call it liberal or whatever. This is taking place, and it's called progressive. It's called feminist. It's called whatever. They call it a lot of things. Right? But they're trying to break open barriers. However, you're going to notice in the environment in which they're trying to break open barriers, it's a lot of ladies getting the blunt end of the stick, if you know what I'm saying. Like, they really get handled. They really get the high hard one, basically, the ladies in this situation, every single time. That's what we're going to describe as we read on. Perhaps this culture is just one of the many offshoots of the sexually progressive Bay Area, which gave rise to the Desert Festival of Free Expression, Burning Man. Some of y'all might be aware of that festival. Now frequented by the tech elite. Of course it is. In fact, it's ran by the tech elite. You might be kind of concerned about it. Still, the vast majority of people in Silicon Valley have no idea that these kind of sex parties are happening at all. It's funny because they live there and they have no idea. And I know because I heard all about it. I've been knowing, right? This article, it definitely details all of what I've been saying, but I've been saying it. And a lot of people have been saying it about the perversion involved in these places and how they keep women down, and it's disgusting. But they try to trick us into thinking that we're the ones keeping women down, and that's never been the case. All right, so just to continue, a lot of people don't know that the sex parties are even happening, and they live there. All right, so they're blind as hell. If you're reading this and shaking your head saying, this isn't the Silicon Valley I know, let's take a moment now to acknowledge there's a lot of people who never really thought about this in Silicon Valley. Say, this isn't the Silicon Valley that I know. You may not be a rich and edgy male founder or investor. All right. So if this isn't the Silicon Valley that you know, if this is surprising to you at all, that's because you don't know shit. You're not in the field, but if you're in the field, you know all about it. All right. So for those who say this isn't the Silicon Valley that I know, you may not be a rich, edgy male founder and investor, or a female tech in her 20s. A young, you know what I'm saying, entry-level, supple young lady in her 20s in Silicon Valley. Promise you she knows all about this. And she's been invited to these parties. Right? So anyone who is on the outside would be looking at this and saying, oh my God, this is flipped up. One female entrepreneur told me, she said, but the people in it have a very different perception of what's going on. And like I said, we've highlighted that these people who go to the parties have a wildly different perspective on what's going on. They feel as though they're expanding their horizons. They feel as though that they're making their lives better. All right? That sexually they've been held back into believing certain things. Meanwhile, they just need to just let that go and do all sort of sexual whatever. And that's the way to make their lives better. However, at the same time, they don't talk about it openly. They have anonymity and it's all secret. See how that's retarded? It's completely retarded. And in the next video, we're just going to read a little bit further and dive further into how the retardation is actually suicidal. It's actually very devastating and deadly. Alright, so I'm going to holler at y'all in a second, a little bit later. It's January the 4th, 2018, and I'll holler at y'all.